Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto Was Betrayed by His Friends, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. A massive wave of water crashed in between tree trunks as it surged toward the hidden village of Konoha. It was fast and powerful enough to pull small shrubs out of the ground, and instantly swallowed any creatures not swift enough in their climbs to escape it. This technique belonged to Hoshigaki Kisame, and it was meant to ease the path of the 100 Akatsuki underlings that marched behind, waiting to prove their worth to the organization by as many people as they could. As the large wave drew close to Konoha, something happened that Kisame did not expect. A huge amount of earth seemed to launch itself spontaneously from in front of Konoha's entrance and stop the wave from passing into the village. "Excellent work, Sakura-san," shouted Lee enthusiastically as he examined the wall that had risen from punching the earth. He nimbly leapt up to the top to spy his enemy. Kisame approached quickly on the water's surface. Lee got in his battle stance to greet his opponent. "You," shouted Kisame as he approached Lee. "You recognize me," shouted Lee as his enemy drew near. "You don't recognize me," shouted Kisame furiously. "There's something familiar about you," said Lee as he watched the Akatsuki agent. "I don't have time for this," shouted Kisame as he leapt and swung his blade Samehada toward the taijutsu master. Lee effortlessly dodged the attack and spun around countering. Kisame managed to summon a wall of water to throw Lee back. Kisame laughed. "Do you even have any ninjutsu techniques?" asked Kisame. Lee leapt toward him with amazing speed. Kisame launched a blast of water from his hand at Lee, but he effortlessly dodged it. Kisame launched more and more blasts, but to his surprise, he could not lead his target enough to connect. Lee began running faster and faster in tight circles around Kisame. "Konoha Senpu," shouted Lee as he hurled his arms and legs around toward Kisame. He leapt to avoid the attack, but he was not swift enough to dodge. He attempted to swing Samehada up to block, but Lee managed to land a kick to his face and knock him back. "I underestimated your taijutsu," said Kisame. "It won't happen again." Lee stood tall in a defensive posture watching for his enemy's next maneuver. "Soldiers!" shouted Kisame as he turned to the 100 men that had been following him. To his surprise, he heard a series of horrifying screams. Many of the soldiers were writhing in pain on the ground. Others were fighting toward a ninja in a large dark coat. "What is this jutsu?" The swarm of bugs seemed to be coming toward him next. Kisame launched a powerful jet of water at the approaching swarm, but it was too narrow to be effective against such small opponents spread out as they were. "I see I am outnumbered," said Kisame as he narrowly avoided another spinning kick that Lee attempted to deliver. He caused himself to withdraw down into the depths of the pool that he had created with his initial wave. He began spinning his sword around, causing the water all around to move. At first the motion was slow, but after some time, he had created a small whirlpool. Lee leapt back to the protection of the earthen wall that Sakura had thrown up. "I think it's time to drain the pool," said Sakura as she leapt down to the bottom of his whirlpool. It took all of her strength to avoid being drawn into the center, but she managed to reach the bottom and punch the ground again. It was powerful enough to cause the earth to open slightly and begin draining the water that he had summoned. Lee leapt toward Kisame again, hoping to catch him. The great sword the Akatsuki agent swung seemed to deflect all of Lee's attacks, and then finally knocked him back into the earth wall where Sakura stopped him from painfully into it. She decided it was time she hit more than the ground, and leapt cautiously toward the sword-wielding attacker. "I will show you the strength of Konoha," said Sakura as she leapt toward her foe. Kisame s with his sword repeatedly, hoping to tear through the pink-haired ninja. "Your strength is nothing, Leaf Shinobi," retorted Kisame. Sakura nimbly slid under and around the Akatsuki attacks. She gathered her chakra into a punch and jabbed at Kisame. He slid his great sword up and absorbed the chakra in her attack. "Sakura-san," shouted Lee as he rushed to help her up. "His sword makes it difficult to use my power attacks," said Sakura as she wiped B off her face and stood up. Lee clenched his fists and rushed again to circle his opponent. "You are fast," said Kisame softly as he pulled his sword up defensively. "Your water techniques are impressive," said Lee as he dashed back and forth searching for an opening. But you are not nearly fast enough. Lee leapt acrobatically toward Kisum and then disappeared from his opponent's view. Wah! Started Kisum as he felt a powerful hit in his back. Behold the power of youth! Shouted Lee as he began throwing punches and kicks in faster succession. Kisum was propelled through the air as Lee spun faster around. Unable to do anything but watch, the Akatsuki warrior saw Lee wrap his hand over the top of Kisum's head and pull it down into his rising knee. To his surprise, Kisum's face exploded in a splash of water. A water clone! Shouted Lee as he landed again on the water's surface. Everyone searched for where Kisum might have escaped. The water level has dropped, said Shino from underneath his face wrap. He had just finished ensuring that the other enemies would pose no further threat. He escaped through the drain. Everyone whirled around to have Shino's suspicions confirmed. The actual Akatsuki warrior was shredding everything in his path. He must not destroy the village, shouted Lee as he began to untie the weights on his hands and feet. Sakura leapt down the earth barrier she had created and carefully began approaching Kisum. Shino stretched his arms out, summoning his tiny allies to swarm down toward their foe. Before any of them could get there, about 100 kunai, axes, and shuriken began raining down from the night sky on Kisum. He managed to summon a geyser of water in order to deflect these weapons. Tenten-san! Shouted Lee as he leapt to the ground. She smiled as she landed wielding a large sword of her own. Kisum's large sharp teeth shined in the ambient evening light as he looked at his prey. He swung his massive sword at her. She parried the blow away with her own weapon and tried to spin around and kick him, but he unleashed a high-pressured blast of water from his free hand and threw her back. Lee leapt hoping that his moment had come, but Kisum swung his sword at the last moment and caught him. Suddenly Kisum felt the ground shake violently. As he looked up he saw Sakura pulling her fist up from the ground and rushing toward him. Before he could ready his weapon, he found dozens of small bugs leaping on him. Not enough, shouted Kisum as he raised his arms and summoned a large wave to wash the bugs free of his shark-like F and push Sakura back. Lee managed to fly in from nowhere and kick Kisum in the back of his head. He turned to defend against another combo of attacks from the taijutsu user, but instead found himself attacked by Tenten. He only narrowly avoided being into by a vicious swing. He managed to push a large amount of water behind himself to stop his flight, but not before Lee did begin a combination of punches. Kisum pulled his greatsword up defensively, managing to slow Lee's advance for long enough to launch another wall of water to free himself from this assault. A massive amount of earth flew up from beneath the Akatsuki warrior and threw him up. Sakura leapt in a follow-up attack swinging her fist, but was not able to connect with anything but his vicious chakra-absorbing sword. As entertaining as this has been, said Kisum with a smile. I did not just come to the hidden village of Leaf break a few pathetic shinobi, I came to break your wall of fire. He spun around and created several water clones of himself. Enough, shouted one of Kisum's clones as it water prison jutsu around Lee. You're through, shouted another as it imprisoned Sakura. Tenten began fighting vehemently against a third clone, but a fourth trapped her. Shino sprinted out to try and free Tenten, but the other clone surrounded him with a watery prison before he could reach her. Release them, came a voice from behind Kisum. As he turned around he smiled as he saw his new opponent. The evening breeze caught up her blonde ponytails, and pressed her green vest tight against her large feminine curves. Her fists were clenched and her eyes shined with fury in the starlight. Hokage-sama, said Kisum with anticipation. When I have KU, your troublesome village will be finished. Tsunade thrust her fist into the ground causing a huge pit to appear that sucked all of Kisum's lingering wave into the earth. You think you can K me? Chided Tsunade. She leapt into the air and punched at Kisum. I have the upper hand, said Kisum as he spun around and hurled Tsunade backward. She flew back 100 yards and finally crashed into a building. Quickly getting to her feet she ran again at the Akatsuki warrior. She realized that she could not afford to lose too much chakra to his sword. An impressive weapon, said Tsunade as she threw another punch toward Kisum. He brought his sword up defensively, but the Hokage's punch never landed. She immediately spun around and kicked her opponent in the side of the head. He managed to deflect most of the strength of Tsunade's attack, but still flew a good distance backward. And you have impressive strength, said Kisum as he returned to his feet. He knew that he could not afford to take a direct hit. He stood up and launched another water jutsu at the Hokage. She easily avoided it and began rushing toward him again. The toe began trading a flurry of attacks. As Tsunade dodged and jabbed, Kisame blocked and swung Samehada. Tsunade's eye caught her young ninjas trapped in water bubbles. She knew she could not open herself to attack, but had to hurry her offensive against him. She spun around in an amazing display of taijutsu, driving Kisame back as he dodged and blocked. Kisame's eyes were locked on Tsunade, throwing a flurry of kicks and punches. After a minute more, Tsunade leapt back. "Low on chakra?" asked Kisame smugly. He raised Samehada over his head. A dark energy seemed to cover his greatsword as he approached Tsunade. She was breathing heavily, exhausted from her attack. She looked over at Sakura. There was a look of worry in her student's eyes. She flashed a smile at her briefly before looking up at Kisame. Shouted Kisame as he swung his greatsword down. Tsunade grabbed the blade with her bare hand and stopped it, then tore it out of Kisame's hand. "What?" shouted the Akatsuki warrior as he stumbled backwards. He looked at his sword and suddenly realized what had happened. It was not dark energy that had surrounded his blade in the night, it was a cloud of insects that had coated its surface and feasted on the chakra within the weapon. It was the bugs that had served as a protective layer between Tsunade and Kisame's attack. "I am not defeated," shouted Kisame as he raised his hand to launch a water attack. Tremendous pressure in his arms suddenly caused his skin to burst. Kisame cried out in pain as he saw insects packed on his fingers stopping the flow of water. He looked at his clones where Shino appeared still trapped. He seemed to evaporate into a swarm of bugs that were small enough to escape the prison and attack the clones. Lee managed to break free and another pair of clones, freeing Sakura and Tenten. "Don't you get it?" said Tsunade. "I am not the wall of fire." Kisame looked at the young leaf shinobi approaching him slowly. "It is the love for one another, the important people in our lives," said Tsunade. "It is the strength of those that have gone before us," as she pointed at the majestic sculptures of the 5 Hokages carved into the mountain side. "It is the hope in those who will follow after us," she said as she looked at Sakura, Lee, Tenten, and Shino. "No matter what happens to any of us," said Sakura, "you cannot defeat the wall of fire." She walked up to Kisame and punched him hard in the gut. The Akatsuki warrior flew back and into a tree trunk. Coughing he slowly pulled himself up. As he lifted his weak head, the last thing he saw was Tsunade punching him in the face. He flew high into the air and out of sight beyond the city walls. "I'll send someone else to find him later," said Tsunade. "Go find Naruto and Hinata. They are important people that must be protected." Lee, Tenten, Sakura, and Shino began making their way east to find their comrade. "Whoa," said Naruto. "That was weird." Hinata whirled around to face him. He seemed to be relaxed in spite of being confronted by Itachi. "Hey, Hinata-chan," he said with a smile. "Naruto-kun, what are you?" started Hinata. "You haven't eaten very much of your ramen," interrupted Naruto. Hinata looked back at Itachi. His cold, emotionless expression was still augmented by the red color of his Sharingan-enhanced eyes. "Naruto!" shouted Hinata. He did not respond. Instead, it appeared that he was pretending to eat his own bowl of ramen. "It's no use," said Itachi slowly. "He is inescapably locked in my genjutsu. Why did you release me then?" asked Hinata as she continued shifting her gaze between the ninja she loved and the ninja who had captured him. "Because your bonds of affection have already made you weak without my genjutsu," replied Itachi. Naruto on the other hand is quite unpredictable, mostly on account of the demon within him. "Naruto is not strong only because of the Kyuubi," shouted Hinata in a sudden surge of defensiveness. "And my love for him has not made me weak. Don't underestimate me." "Byakugan," shouted Hinata. "What do you intend to see with those eyes?" chided Itachi. Hinata pulled her arms up defensively, preparing to use her gentle fist style. "Do you hope to close my tenketsus?" asked Itachi arrogantly. "How will you find them?" Hinata focused in on her enemy. To her horror, the number of Itachi's tenketsus appeared to double, and then it appeared to her as if they were tiny creatures swimming through his body with a will of their own. "My eye technique will trump yours every time," said Itachi. Hinata furrowed her brow and rushed toward the Akatsuki illusionist. She tried to deliver a series of hits, but before she realized what was going on, Itachi was behind her. I am too fast for that to work, said Itachi as he kicked Hinata and sent her skidding across the ground. She rolled over and leapt to her feet. Naruto seemed to be less lively than he had previously been. The distraction portion of the illusion seemed to have been completed, and it appeared that Itachi now desired to completely disable her favorite ninja. Undoubtedly this was to get the Kyuubi from within him. Hinata knew that she must find some way to prevail before they extracted the demon fox in order to save Naruto's life. Her attention immediately shifted toward Itachi. You cannot prevail, said Itachi as he suddenly appeared behind Hinata again and threw her across the room. I will find a way to defeat you, shouted Hinata in an uncharacteristically confident voice. Her beloved Naruto's life was on the line. She was willing to do whatever it took to stop Itachi. Stop acting tough, said Itachi as he rushed toward Hinata. Hinata vaulted herself toward him, hoping to catch him off guard. Though she managed to deflect a pair of punches, Itachi's combinations were too quick even for the power of the Byakugan to detect. Itachi's foot S into Hinata's face, and B oozed from her mouth as she careened across the chamber. Her vision had become fuzzy, but as struggled back to her feet she realized that there was a second figure standing above her. Hinata, said Shino, do not push yourself, Sakura will tend to your injuries. How did you? Started Hinata in a broken voice. A small bug emerged from her coat and returned to Shino. I thought that it had, started Hinata. You have been fighting a genjutsu master, said Shino without a hint of emotion. Hinata-san, whispered Sakura as she began her healing jutsu on Hinata. Is this all the cavalry that Konoha sent? Asked Itachi. Immediately dozens of kunai began to fly toward him. It was Tenten. He easily avoided her attacks, but was caught off guard by a swift kick from Lee. I will show you speed that you cannot even see, shouted Lee. He spun around delivering more and more punches. He had managed to catch the Uchiha butcher off guard by predicting his movements to avoid Tenten's attacks, and knew that this would not be an opportunity he would be likely to get again. The ties on his wrists loosened as he began to unleash the full strength of his taijutsu. Initial gate, open, shouted Lee as his bandages wrapped around Itachi and he spun him into the ground. Heel gate, open, shouted Lee as he launched Itachi back into the air. Life gate, open, shouted Lee as he his opponent up further into the height of the cavern. Harm gate, open, shouted Lee as he surged closer to Itachi. Limit gate, open, shouted Lee as he unleashed his strength into Itachi. Back and forth leapt Lee, breaking Itachi's skin open in several places and causing his B to ooze all over his dark cloak. Lee's face was bright red as the limits of his body were removed and he poured his full strength into each attack. The veins on his forehead seemed as if they would burst, but somehow, Lee pressed his attack further. This is bad, thought Itachi. He was unable to follow Lee's motion. If I can just break free, he won't be able to do this again. Kaiten, Gokakyu no Jutsu, shouted Itachi. Lee had thought he had managed to land enough hits that Itachi would not be able to perform any techniques, but he was powerless against the massive ball of flame that filled the room. He flew backward and collided with the cavern floor. Itachi landed on the ground and recovered his breath. He wiped off the B dripped from the wounds on his face. There is no time to rest, shouted Tenten as she continued her barrage of ranged weapons. Itachi flipped out of the way of her projectiles to find himself surrounded by a cloud of insects. There is no escape either, said Shino confidently as he directed his allies to attack the Akatsuki warrior. Itachi continued leaping away, but he was unable to avoid all of the bugs. He his N as he tried to continue to stay away from Tenten and Shino's ranged attacks. It's over, shouted Sakura as she ran and punched her opponent. Itachi flew across the room and skidded several yards across the stone floor. Not even close, whispered Itachi. Sakura gasped as she whirled around to see him standing right behind her. Itachi delivered a punch of his own, sending Sakura flying next to the body that Sakura had hit so far. To her horror, she realized that it was Shino that she had punched. She scrambled to her knees and tried to perform healing jutsu, but to her horror, a kunai with an exploding note attached to the end landed next to her. Too slow, Itachi, shouted Tenten. Sakura realized too late that Itachi had managed to use genjutsu to confuse allies with enemies. She and Shino were blasted back against the far wall. Sakura struggled to maintain consciousness. Shino was B from his mouth because of Sakura's tremendous punch and had already lost consciousness. Sakura struggled to continue her healing jutsu on Shino, but realized she barely had enough concentration left to keep her eyelids partly open. She turned to Tenten, who was being mercilessly beat by Itachi. "Stop!" shouted a high voice from behind them. It was Hinata. Itachi punched Tenten in the face and sent her flying across the cavern. As she landed, Tenten slumped over. It was clear that she was unable to fight further. Itachi shook his head as he looked at Hinata. Sakura had not had much time to heal her injuries, but Hinata still stood tall in her defensive posture against Itachi. "What did you think would happen here?" asked Itachi. "You cannot prevail against me." The white of Hinata's Byakugan-enhanced eyes shined in the shadows of the cave. There was an eerie shadow that surrounded Itachi in his bee-stained Akatsuki robe. "I said before," said Hinata confidently. "I will find a way to defeat you, and I will never take that back. That's my way of the ninja." "Your threats are idle," said Itachi as he rushed toward her. She leapt into the air. In a defense against a genjutsu attack, she closed her eyes, and shut her ears up. Opening them again briefly, she saw Itachi preparing another great fireball attack. She pulled herself around as he uttered his jutsu. "Kaiten, Gokakyu no Jutsu." Hinata managed to shield herself from the brunt of the flames by releasing a small amount of chakra from her back. The fiery attack did not do any harm to her, but did push her back a great distance. She kept her feet beneath her and landed on the ground. She spun to face her opponent and rushed toward him. "Bunshin no Jutsu," shouted Hinata as a pair of clones appeared near her. "You make my job easy," said Itachi as he pointed his finger at Hinata. She suddenly fell to the earth, having been kicked by one of her own clones. "These clones have no form, they can't hurt me," said Hinata to herself. She again used intense focus and shut her senses off, then back on. She found herself on the floor with Itachi rushing toward her. "This is my chance," thought Hinata as she sprung to her feet. "Yuuken, 8 trigrams palm's great heavenly spin," shouted Hinata. It had taken her some training to accomplish the ability that Neji had reinvented on his own. She had found it difficult to emit chakra from every part of her body simultaneously, but she had been able to finally do it on a few select occasions. Bright light flowed from her body as she spun around. It tore into Itachi's F as the jutsu picked up the Akatsuki illusionist and threw him back. "You are not as helpless as you appear," said Itachi slowly. "But you are not immune to the power of my genjutsu. Someone like you that has so many bonds, you will never be able to deal with change." Itachi's shape changed as she watched him. She tried to close her senses again, but when she opened her eyes, to her horror, she found that he had taken the form of Naruto. "You will not be able to destroy me while I am like this," said the illusion of Naruto. "You don't have the heart of a ninja." "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," shouted the Sharingan-wielding Naruto. A dozen shadow clones leapt at Hinata. She cried out in discomfort as she saw the one she loved filled with anger for her. Perhaps Itachi was right. She could barely move as she was pounded by the dozens of Naruto clones. "Do you know what happens when leaves change?" That was the question that Itachi had asked her just before she had found herself in this awful place. "They fall," had been his answer. She could not help but feel like a leaf struggling to maintain its bond to its branch as the autumn frost came upon it. She did not want to fall, but what could she do against such a terrible force? She did not have power to sustain herself, and especially when it appeared all around her that the one who had helped sustain her was the one that was hurting her. "We will KO Hinata," shouted one of the Naruto shadow clones as it kicked her in the gut. She groaned and fell to the cavern floor as she endured hit after hit. The pain was almost unbearable, but she had been caught off guard too quickly to perform any counters. "It's not real," shouted a hoarse voice from a distant corner of the cavern. It was Sakura encouraging her not to give up. Sakura coughed, and spatted out of her dry lips, but the intense look of her teal eyes carried the message clearly to Hinata. "Yuuken, 8 trigrams palm's great heavenly spin," shouted Hinata as she caused the shadow clones to vanish away. All that remained was the original Sharingan-wielding Naruto illusion, and an exhausted Hinata in her defensive stance. "Fight on, Hinata," whispered Sakura as she lost consciousness. "Byakugan," whispered Hinata. Her enhanced sight could see Sakura and Shino on the far side of the cavern, Hinata toward the entrance, and the illusion Naruto in front of her. She suddenly recalled the real Naruto was lying on the floor caught in an illusion on the other side of the cavern by the ceiling statue. That's the answer, thought Hinata as she avoided looking toward the real Naruto. What will you do now? Asked the illusion of Naruto. She rushed with tremendous speed over to the genuine Naruto. You can't escape, shouted the illusion of Naruto as he rushed to block the exit. Why would I want to escape? Asked Hinata softly as she knelt down, pulled Naruto up into her arms. I have the key to victory right here. Even if you managed to awaken him, I could easily trap him in another genjutsu, said Itachi, who had retaken his original form. You have confused my Byakugan technique, so that I cannot close your tenketsus, said Hinata. But I can still see his. Hinata looked down at her beloved ninja. His body shifted slightly back and forth as he breathed. She supported his head in her hand as she knelt by his side. With her free hand, she ran her fingers through his spiky blonde hair. You're going to attack the ninja you love, shouted Itachi in confusion. This is coming from the man that's almost all of his own clan. Asked Hinata angrily as she turned again to Naruto. She gently laid him down on the ground and kissed him softly on the cheek. Did you suppose that I can only manipulate tenketsus to stop chakra flow? Asked Hinata as she used her fingers to strike Naruto in several places. Itachi's eyes grew wide. He rushed towards Hinata. Genjutsu is nothing more than a well-constructed lie, said Hinata as she continued her deliberate strikes. I will show you what really happens when leaves change. Itachi grabbed her by the T and thrust his fist into her face. His Akatsuki ring tore the F on Hinata's forehead as he struck her repeatedly. Why would someone like you think that you could defeat me? Shouted Itachi as he threw her to the ground and kicked her in the gut. She skidded across the hard cavern floor several feet. I will not take back my words, whispered Hinata as she coughed and struggled to maintain consciousness. That's my way of the ninja, shouted Naruto as he got to his hands and feet. His eyes seemed to glow as if they were on fire. The stripes on his face grew dark. His nails grew long, and a terrible red glow surrounded Naruto as he slowly crawled toward his enemy. Itachi cautiously backed away. You will not harm Hinata again, shouted Naruto as he crawled closer. A red tail bubbled up from the chakra that continued to leak from his body. I was afraid it might come to this, said Itachi. The red and black patterns of his Sharingan-enhanced eyes began to shift. Mangekyo Sharingan, shouted Itachi. Naruto felt slightly dizzy as the colors of the cavern began to change. He lost sight of Hinata and Itachi, and instead found himself back in the hidden village of Konoha. There he saw Itachi and Kisame destroying every home, and every shinobi that crossed their path. For the next 24 hours I will show you the fate of your hidden village, you will be powerless to stop us, came a voice from within him. It was Itachi that spoke. He tried to turn around, but whichever direction he turned, he saw scenes of butchery instead of his opponent. When he tried to rush toward the unnatural colored Akatsuki ninja, he found that no matter how fast he ran, his distance to his enemy did not change in this bizarre dimension. Fight me, Itachi, shouted Naruto. There was no response to his challenge other than seeing Itachi continually S-Leaf Ninja. Tsunade rushed up to try and defend her village, but Kisame tore her arm off with his massive weapon Samehada. Granny Tsunade, shouted Naruto. It was too late for her to hear. Another fierce swing decapitated the Hokage. Tears began to roll down Naruto's cheeks. You will pay for this, Itachi, shouted Kakashi as he activated his Chidori technique and rushed toward the Uchiha M. Faster than Itachi could move, Kakashi thrust his lightning-enhanced fist through Itachi's C. Too late, said Itachi as he seemed to dissolve and reveal that Kakashi had Ka-Leaf Ninja. A powerful swing of Samehada tore Kakashi's legs off and left him on the ground. Itachi used a kunai to finish the job. Kakashi-sensei, shouted Naruto. Stop it, Itachi, he shrieked. His B boiled as he saw the continued S of his comrades. There was no mercy from Itachi's technique. Naruto was forced to continue watching as Kisame and Itachi S everyone in sight. Hours passed, but Naruto was unable to do anything as Kiba and Akamaru were dismembered. Neji was swallowed up in a terrible water technique, and though he fought vehemently to escape, he could not hold his breath indefinitely. At length, her drowned in the depths of Kisame's flood. Naruto sobbed at his inability to stop the carnage that Itachi forced him to witness. Why can't I defeat this technique? He wondered to himself. The horror was unrelenting. The off-colored Kisame and Itachi marched toward the academy where Iruka was working hard to help evacuate the remaining children. Run! Shouted Iruka as he realized his students were in danger. He whirled about to face his Akatsuki foes. I will stop you even if it costs my life, shouted Iruka. You will not be able to stop us, said Itachi. And you will lose your life anyway. He suddenly appeared right next to Iruka and hit him. Iruka flew backwards and skidded across the ground. Iruka-sensei, shouted Naruto. He longed to go to the aid of his old instructor. Seeing Iruka injured brought back memories of when he had taken a shuriken to protect Naruto. There was no one to protect Iruka, and in a matter of moments, all his motion and breathing ceased. It was not long before the pair of Akatsuki marauders had caught up with the academy students. There was no hesitation as they came upon the children fleeing for their lives. As the great sword Samehada swung back and forth, it shaved the F from the frightened students. I will kill you, shouted Naruto. Against these eyes, you can do nothing, whispered Itachi's voice within Naruto's mind. Naruto tried to calm down and think about his situation. This is just an illusion, said Naruto slowly. It's not real. My technique, the Mangekyo Sharingan, it is too powerful for you to simply dismiss, whispered Itachi. Naruto tried to close off his senses, but he could still hear the screams of villagers, and even trying to close his eyes, he still saw the off-color versions of Itachi and Kisame shedding the bee of villagers. It seemed to drag on longer and longer. Naruto wept as he saw the carnage continue. He strained to try and move, but the harder he strained, the more exhausted he became. Slowly his vision began to fade, and he heard other voices around him. At first it was too difficult to understand, but after Itachi's technique lessened, the voices seemed to clarify. Suddenly, he began to recognize the voices he was hearing. Release Naruto, said Kakashi. You have used too much chakra against Naruto, said Yamato. You don't have enough left to deal with us. I may be disadvantaged, said Itachi. But I am not helpless. Moku Yoheiki, shouted Yamato as a dome of wood surrounded Itachi. Lightning began dancing around Kakashi's fist. He ran quickly and dove into the wooden dome. As his Chidori attack tore through the wood, he quickly twisted to avoid any chance of Itachi catching him off guard. Itachi leapt just in time to avoid Kakashi's attack. Naruto was dizzy and nauseous as the effects of Itachi's technique wore off. He was trying to keep up with the battle, but it is as if everything was still spinning. Kakashi-sensei, muttered Naruto as he tried to keep from throwing up. Yamato began employing more Mokuton techniques to attempt to bind Itachi while Kakashi chased after him. Fire and lightning lit the cavern as Naruto got slowly to his feet. Look out Yamato, shouted Kakashi as Itachi rushed at him. Yamato leapt out of his path and cast a stream of water at Itachi. The exhausted Akatsuki agent was blasted backwards. You're right, muttered Itachi. I don't have enough chakra. He rushed toward the cavern entrance. Yamato tried to create a wood dome to seal him in, but he managed to burn his way through with a quick fire jutsu. Let him go, Yamato, said Kakashi slowly as he came to Naruto. We need to aid the injured here. Yamato nodded and returned to Naruto's side. Are you injured? Asked Kakashi. I'm okay, said Naruto slowly. The horrors he had witnessed in the vision that Itachi had forced him to witness had taken a toll. His body was stiff, and Naruto found it taxing to move even slightly. Can we help Sakura? Asked Kakashi. If she isn't too hurt, she may be able to help us with the others. Yamato came up to Sakura. Yamato, whispered Sakura as her eyelids opened. What happened? Where is Itachi? He escaped, said Yamato softly. Can you help with the injured? Sakura nodded as she got to her feet. Shino was still hurt, but surprisingly, his insect allies had shielded him from as much damage as it initially appeared he had taken. Lee, on the other hand, was hurt pretty badly. Sakura began using her healing ninjutsu. Yamato tended to Tenten. It appeared that she had not taken as much damage as they initially thought either. Naruto and Kakashi went to see Hinata. There was a deathly stillness about her. Hinata-chan, whispered Naruto as he gently touched her face. Dried bee had caked on the sides of her mouth, and her eyes were stuck in a half-open position. It's too late Naruto, whispered Kakashi. Shut up, shouted Naruto as he pulled Hinata's still body close to him. Tears rolled down his cheeks. She will be okay. Sakura-chan, come here and help Hinata. Sakura had managed to stabilize Lee's condition, and decided it would be alright to check on Hinata. As soon as she approached, her head lowered. I'm sorry, Naruto, said Sakura. Don't tell me you're sorry, snapped Naruto. Use your medical ninjutsu. It won't do any good, whispered Sakura as a tear welled up in her eye and trickled down her cheek. Yes, it will, shouted Naruto. There's no way that she could be. His voice cracked, and tears continued to pour out his eyes and splash onto his orange tunic. The tears seemed to hover for a few moments on the bright fabric before sinking in and soaking the threads. The dust on the floor of the cavern darkened into tiny amounts of dark mud as a few stray tears splashed on the ground. The red light of the sun began to shine through the opening of the cave as it crept slowly above the horizon. Hinata, whispered Naruto as he again picked her up gently and held her close. He had only begun to perceive the love that Hinata had had for him, and now that she was gone, in spite of the presence of his friends, he felt alone. The memories of his early childhood came flooding back to him. He had been orphaned and cursed to bear a burden that he had done nothing to deserve. Naruto, said Kakashi, trying to bring reason to his student. This is not helping, it's time to let go. No, shouted Naruto. Slowly Tenten and Shino made their way to see their comrades. Naruto, whispered Tenten. Don't make it worse. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. Shino managed to keep his emotions in check, although he lowered his head as Naruto sobbed. There's no way she could have S like that, shouted Naruto angrily. She was from the Hyuga clan. Even the strongest of us cannot stand against Itachi's technique, said Yamato. Naruto whirled around to face him. There was something in his tone that made the blonde ninja uncomfortable. We cannot defeat an eye ability like that, agreed Kakashi as he pulled his headband over his right eye to cover his own Sharingan ability. Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion. What are you saying? Shouted Naruto. We almost defeated him, and you can do that eye ability too. We are only delaying the inevitable, said Kakashi slowly. Akatsuki cannot be stopped. Hinata is only the beginning of Konoha's casualties. Shut up, shouted Naruto as he got to his feet. Naruto, said Tenten slowly as she tied her hair back in a ponytail. Don't get angry, you know it's true. Sakura slowly approached Naruto and hugged him. It's okay, Naruto, she whispered. We aren't blaming you. Her blue eyes seemed to shine as he looked into the face of his friend. In fact, said Shino, we probably would have if you hadn't delayed him. What are you saying? Said Naruto softly. I didn't delay him, that was Kakashi and Yamato. It does not matter, Naruto-kun, said Lee as he raised his thumb cheerfully toward Naruto. You are in the springtime of your youth. That doesn't make any sense, said Naruto softly as he looked at Lee's shiny green outfit. How did you recover so quickly? You were burned by Itachi's fireball. You're missing the point, said Sakura angrily. Look at Hinata. Tears again welled up in his eyes as he looked down at Hinata. Bees still oozed out of the corners of her mouth. He knelt beside her and held her close. As he pulled her head close to his, he suddenly had the strangest sensation. He could not feel her head. He looked toward the mouth of the cave and saw a raven with red eyes peering intensely at him. The memory of Itachi's raven techniques came rushing back into Naruto's mind. He had not fled. I'm not missing the point, shouted Naruto as he dropped Hinata and leapt toward the mouth of the cavern. Moku Yoheiki, shouted Yamato as a dome of wood formed around Naruto. You're losing control, Naruto, shouted Yamato. Calm down. Naruto, screamed Sakura. Itachi is still out there, shouted Naruto. Rasengan, shouted Naruto as he shredded the wood barrier that bound him into splinters and rushed out. As soon as he broke free, Kakashi grabbed his arm and threw him back into the cavern. Naruto, shouted Kakashi, get a hold of yourself. Naruto skidded across the ground and found himself crawling with Shino's bugs. He frantically tried to brush them off, but more climbed onto him before he could free himself. Tenten twirled a long staff around and hit Naruto hard in the face, causing him to fly backward again. Why are you attacking me? Shouted Naruto. Sakura punched the ground, causing the earth to divide underneath him. He fell several feet before painfully crashing against jagged rocks. What is happening? Whispered Naruto. Why is everyone suddenly attacking me? Yamato sealed him in the pit he had fallen into with another wood prison technique. Nothing made sense to him. The only thing he was certain of was his need to get away from this cavern. He felt a slight tickle on the back of his N. He suddenly realized that it was one of Shino's bugs. In a matter of seconds he was swimming in them. He struggled to ascend the rocky slopes of the pit that bound him, but the bugs continued to pull him down. Their tiny insect bee pressed against him with unnatural strength. Through the wooden barrier above him, he could hear Shino laughing. "You can never escape Naruto," he said as he continued laughing. Shino never laughs, thought Naruto to himself. The more he thought about it, the more he recalled other things that did not seem right. Tenten doesn't have a ponytail, Lee really was burned, Kakashi-sensei always covers his left eye, not his right, Sakura doesn't have blue eyes, Hinata. Hinata gave me something, whispered Naruto. She had somehow changed the way his chakra flowed to help him see something that he could not easily pick out before. He recalled how easily he had fallen for the trick Sakura who had savagely butchered Tsunade. That version of Sakura had looked exactly like the actual Sakura, but now, there were subtle differences. He looked up at the wood barrier holding him and squinted his eyes as if straining to see something beyond it. A subtle glow appeared in his eyes, and slowly an image appeared before him. The sensation of the crawling bugs dissipated, and the pain from crashing into the rocks from Sakura's attack seemed to diminish. Gradually, as he looked up, he saw a statue with many fingers and strange eyes. It was the ceiling statue that Itachi had introduced him to at the beginning of their confrontation. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, carefully monitoring the way each perception came to him. Concentrate, thought Naruto to himself. It was the same thing he had done when he was with Jiraiya learning the Rasengan technique. He focused on the ceiling statue, and slowly, his surroundings melted away. When he turned to his surroundings, he saw that almost no time had passed. He stood before Itachi. Hinata was breathing, and struggling to maintain consciousness. As Hinata saw Naruto seem to regain his focus, she smiled. The glazed-over look that appeared on his face had made her worry that her technique had not worked. He clenched his fists as he turned to face Itachi. Sweat beaded on Itachi's face as the red and black design in his Sharingan-enhanced eyes shifted back to its previous state. "Your technique will no longer work right on me," whispered Naruto. "You have used too much chakra." Itachi breathed heavily as he watched his opponent. Hinata's strategy had caused just enough change that he was unable to trick Naruto into a position of vulnerability that would allow Akatsuki to extract the Kyuubi. He had managed to escape his illusion. "One thing is clear though," said Naruto as he slowly approached his opponent. "What is that?" whispered Itachi as he circled defensively. "You are low on chakra," said Naruto. "Perhaps," whispered Itachi. In a quick motion he managed to grab Hinata, pull her in front of him like a shield. "But I am not yet defeated," he whispered. "What will you do, Naruto?" Red chakra again began to leak out of Naruto's body. The stripes on his face thickened, and his nails grew long again. Hinata gasped as she saw the intense anger in her beloved ninja's eyes. "I will kill you," shouted Naruto. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.